I am Rosalind Whitley, and I work at Kentik. And I would like to tell you a bit about Kentik first before I jump into what I want to talk to you about today, which is solving faster in the cloud when you're dealing with hybrid infrastructure and what observability can do for you in that case. But let me talk a little bit about a lot of our work when we're building and maintaining application infrastructure is answering questions, right? Hopefully taking action on what we find out when it makes sense. And the more information that we have to work with, the better. However, sometimes the way that information is presented, that can make or break how productive you can be with it and how useful it actually is. And we are talking about the cloud product today. We're talking about Kentik Cloud. And we've noticed that when you have a kind of a traditionally networked infrastructure, the questions that you have to answer are a little bit different than the questions that come up in the cloud. So here's some of the questions that come up in the cloud that infrastructure operators may be trying to answer. And Cloud VPC flow logs can answer some of these questions. But what Kentik does is we enrich the data from VPC flow logs and other places with a lot of cloud, network, application context to make that data really meaningful in solving the problems that you need to solve. And also, one thing that I think my colleague mentioned is you never know ahead of time what kinds of questions you're going to need to ask. You may not know. So you need a powerful data engine to power that like kind of unstructured investigation. That's what we call the known unknowns or unknown knowns. I'm not sure I have that idiom correct, so I'm going to move on. But anyway, this is an overview of all the data that we use to our mission, make life awesome for people running infrastructure. This is all the data that it takes to do that. And what we do is put all that together in one engine where you can query it, you can slice it and dice it, and depending upon who you are and what you care about, and even the names you use to talk about things, the terms that you're familiar with, we give you those so that you can use that to sort the data. And I think the power that I've found with Kentik is that there is something to be said at even looking at application problems from the network layer on up. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. This is uptime, productivity, cost control metrics that were derived from Kentik customer survey data. I'm about to go into the demo, I promise. It is the next slide. I'm going to talk a lot today about resolving incidents and tickets. As a former infrastructure engineer, that's like bread and butter still a lot of the time. And more on that a little bit later. But a question that we get a lot when we're talking about this, solving these infrastructure incidents, well, why wouldn't you use an APM tool, an application performance monitoring tool, to understand application issues? And that's a good question that I'm also going to keep talking about. We're definitely part of a suite of tools that we can use to, like APM tools like New Relic, our partner, also Sumo Logic, Datadog. But we work with a lot of customers who actually can't use APM tools to get visibility into their workloads because they aren't their workloads, right? So actually, IBM Cloud is a great example of that. And we have a number of customers who are platforms as a service or providing infrastructure as a service. And my last gig was actually working for a fledgling cloud provider. So I sort of have a little bit of insight into that issue firsthand. When you don't own the workload, but you need to understand how it's performing, how it's communicating, how it may be affecting the performance of other workloads, and how it's consuming resources. So I want to talk a little bit about how that comes up in the enterprise too today. I want to first talk about quickly resolving incidents, and I'm going to give you a little scenario, and I'm going to talk through it. So I am an infrastructure engineer. And I was paged because the sales team's app is unavailable. And this is one of many, many, many apps that I manage. I see myself as an internal service provider, and I have a bunch of different development teams who are pinging me, sending me tickets when things go wrong. And it's always on when people always say things are on fire even when they're not. But this is an example when things really are on fire. The sales team can't do their job right now. I think this app connects to DynamoDB, and that's the service the service connection that I'm trying to troubleshoot. I think so.
But what I'm going to start with, I've got the front-end service IP, and I'm just going to enter that in and search it. So 10.75.52.222, that's what's in the ticket. And I'm going to click into that. And so far, not seeing anything that looks fiery, but I'm going to jump in and look at it in the Data Explorer. Our Data Explorer is essentially our query and visualization interface that allows you to access what's in that data engine that I talked about, and this is how you slice and dice it. So I'm going to show you a few ways that I might do that to solve this problem. And I've got a few different things here. First, I'm going to adjust my time scope. Right now, I'm looking at the last day. This is very configurable. I'm going to switch it to look at the last 15 minutes. Actually, I'm going to start with the last 5 minutes. I'm going to see what I find. And the first thing I want to do is add some dimensions. And when I say dimensions, these are the columns, and these are I think of them as attributes, data attributes, but columns in the database that I want to look at and that I might want to filter on. So I'm going to add some of these. I want to see my source IP. Source comes in this first column, then we've got destination, and then there's other stuff in the green column. So source IP, destination IP, and then if I go down to the cloud section, there's some stuff I want to see on I want to see the gateway ID and the gateway type, because sometimes, well, you'll see why later, but the reason why I've chosen, look at how many different ways I can filter this data. I can choose to look at it in a way that makes sense to me when I'm the one solving the problem. And I think that's like kind of the power of this tool, is there's a lot of opportunities to look at the data through a lens that makes sense or might make sense to your colleague in some cases. Okay, so now I'm gonna be able to see everything that's talking to this host. And what I'm looking for is my database IP. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, right here at the top of this list, I think this is probably the database IP because it's sending a bunch of outbound. Well, actually, I can't see whether it's outbound or not. So let's fix that. Now I see whether it's egress or ingress. Okay, cool. So clearly, this is going through a NAT gateway right now. And I know that the service is down right now. Let me see what it's been doing. And I know that this just happened. It was available at least an hour ago. So I'm going to look at what was going on in the last hour. I can compare time ranges here too. There's the opportunity to do that in my time box. I can compare over the previous period, but I'm not going to do that now. I just want to see whether the path has changed. And you can see this is a dramatized example, but indeed, I can see that the path has changed, because it looks like over the last hour, it has used a transit gateway, it has used an elastic network interface, and it has also used a NAT gateway. We're not going to talk a lot about cost control today, but one thing to note here is the NAT gateway is going to be the most expensive way to route this traffic. So sometimes that's going to matter. If I'm a cloud architect or engineer, I might care about that. But right now, I don't care about that. I'm trying to fix this incident. And I just want to go back to the working state. So I'm looking and seeing the current state is this NAT gateway. That's no bueno. So great, because it's also expensive. When it was working, I was using the transit gateway. And so I know now that there's something going on. And there are a lot of company internal reasons that this could be happening. Maybe it's a blue-green deployment. Maybe it's a configuration management misconfiguration, right? Maybe there was a change that someone tried to put through, but it hasn't been okayed by security, and so it's being blocked because there's some sort of possible data exploit. Maybe there's a security group or access control listing going on. I don't know right now, but now I can go into these incident conversations with real granular data. Well, at 1805, it was going through this. Let's see, where was it going through at 1805? Now I said that. it was going through this NAT gateway, and that's like when it started to break, right? So this this gives me, it's kind of like knowledge is power, right? I think knowledge is the ultimate human multi-tool. And if I can go into these conversations with a lot of different data and the ability to get more, then it just makes everything a lot faster. And this came up recently with one of our customers, a large insurance company. They had an outage, and then it resolved itself. It's one of those like mysterious things that resolved itself. And they went back with Kentik on board to look at what had happened, and they saw that there had been a routing change, an unexplained routing change. They took this to the cloud provider. The cloud provider said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Took it to them again with more data. And then the cloud provider said, well, we were doing some maintenance on DynamoDB, let's say. Or I think in this case it was Azure. We were doing some maintenance on this database service, but this is not blocking maintenance. Like there's no outage associated with this. And the problem is, well, we have a security rule. Our customer says we have a security rule that was set up that doesn't allow this type of routing. And so what this did for this customer in this case was allow them to bring some economic kind of leverage to the conversation. And they said, you know what? You're responsible for us not meeting this SLA during this time because you changed the routing, you didn't tell us about it, and you didn't check to see if this violated our security policy. So it kind of gives you like, this is where the rubber meets the road, I think, in some of those conversations. Yeah. So I can also, like I said before, I can compare over a previous period if I want to, so I can look even more quickly. I can see, how does the last hour compare to the last week? This is going to look, or last one day, it's going to look nuts because it's because this, as I said, is a dramatization. But I can compare and see what that looks like. And while I wait for that to load, there are also different ways to view my visualization. So if I want to see this as a SAN key, I'll click on this in a second when this query is done. Yeah, so here's the compare. Here's the comparison. I can see the current period, this is the last hour. I can see the previous period, and then the current period is etched in. And then there's a summary for my comparison. So I can kind of understand how things have changed, and that helps me start to understand why. And when I flip this off, if I want to look at this as a SAN key because that makes more sense to me, and then I'll be able to see sometimes it's flowing through that NAT gateway, other times it's flowing through that transit gateway, or perhaps it's the ENI. So yeah, now I have something to go on, and I think that matters. I think that makes me able to do my job faster, to resolve an incident faster, and also if the incident comes up again, I can be like, oh yeah, I should go check for that routing change. Like maybe it's that. All right, I'm going to move on to my next scenario. So with hybrid infrastructure, when you're migrating workloads to the cloud, especially, it's hard to keep track of everything. This is why I love what I'm going to show you in a second, which is the Kentik map. It's a great place to start to help me get my bearings, VPCs in different regions and how they connect to the data center. So this is my hybrid cloud connectivity, right? Where does the cloud actually connect to what I have on-prem? And I want to show you an example of that. So let's take a look in the map. We're going to go into Kentik map. And I'm going to go into AWS. This map, high level, shows me how all of my resources are connected across the globe. This is on-prem resources and cloud resources, but I'm going to drill into AWS right now because that's what I'm talking about today. So I was just alerted that an application that has recently been migrated to AWS is not working. And I know it's running in a VPC in USE, so I'm going to look at that in a second. But first, I want to go show you, here's my router, and I can see now, here's how things in the cloud are connecting into my data center through this router. And if I want the details on that, I can really get granular about that. But I'm trying to solve an issue here. So I'm going to go down to US East 1, and the VPC that I'm looking for is this one. Virginia 75, yeah, it's 10.75, I think. Yeah. And I'm going to double check the routing here. So here's this public thing that's supposed to be connected to the transit gateway, but I can see it's not routed to the transit gateway, which maybe, I mean, it's also not routed through an internet gateway or a NAT gateway. Maybe that's expected. Maybe it's not supposed to be talking to the internet, but it's also not talking to the data center. So that seems a little strange. Let's see what else is going on here. I've got, yeah, that one's also not routed to the transit gateway. And I can do this show connections here, and that's where I get my little arrows. Oh, that one says no connections were found. That's kind of a red flag. It means it can't talk to any of the other subnets in this VPC. On this one, it looks like it's talking to one other subnet, but again, it's not going out to the transit gateway. Let's look at this one. It's got the same thing going on. There's no path to the transit gateway. So I'm going to compare this. Ooh, this one's routed to a bunch of stuff. But I know the resource I'm looking at is running in here. So I'm going to compare this to what's up top. Show connections. Okay, so this is what I would expect my private and public relationship. If I check this, then I can see that traffic coming into this host is being routed through here, and then that's going through this NAT gateway, but it's also routed to the transit gateway, and that's how it's getting back to my data center. So I know this one can talk to the data center. Let's see about this one. Does it say it's misconfigured? No connections were found. Okay, well, I didn't expect that actually, but this is the one that I care about. And yeah, when I look at my paths, I can see that path looks normal. It's routed to the NAT gateway. This one is routed to the internet gateway because it's public. So that's what I expect. And I'm not a network engineer. That may be obvious at this point. But this gives me some idea that something's going on. So this actually did come up with one of our customers. They were migrating virtually all of their infrastructure to AWS. And there was this one application that was not working and they couldn't understand why. And it turned out, and they didn't have Kentik at the time of the migration, and then they got it. And it turned out that the reason that application kept crashing was because there were 400 servers in a data center somewhere that they had missed. They had a critical service running on them that the application needed to be able to stay available. And so it wasn't until they were able to visualize everything and understand how it's connected together that they then were kind of able to recognize that and address the problem. I think a combination of observability and teamwork is really what makes a successful cloud migration. And that's that having data and being able to see it in a bunch of different ways really helps you have that successful collaboration.
Okay. On that previous visualization there with the network, are you able to do that across multiple AWS accounts?
Across multiple AWS accounts?
Yeah, or multiple, or even all monitored resources. Is that everything that's monitored?
Yes. Yeah, and that's a great question. So any accounts and VPCs that you connect to this, you're going to see them all in the same map. And that's one thing that I love about this is that in AWS itself, right, you have to click into not only every account, you have to click into every VPC to be able to understand what's going on. It's super annoying. So even if you're not multi-cloud, it feels like you're multi-cloud because you can't see what's happening between these two. And it's a lot of manual clicking. This gets rid of all of that. So you can share data from whatever account that you want with Kentik, and you can put it all into the same place. Yeah, great question.
Really nice view.
Cool. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, so I've got another ticket now. Big shock. And I love Kentik because it's got lots of different tools to help me look into problems. This is a newer one that's in beta, and I really wanted to show it to you. The scenario I'm going to bring up is from a real customer. This is from a large technology company. They, again, have the same problem. They have a bunch of different application and engineering teams that they're managing services for. They get tickets from all of them. It's really hard to keep track of which resources are which. So in this case, I've got a ticket from a developer who says, well, this instance can't talk to that instance, or this, and they're getting a lot of these. This instance can't talk to something in this DNS name. Why? Fix it now. And this is where it might not actually be on fire, but it always sounds like it's on fire, right? This is the P1. So I'm going to show you how another way that I might deal with this. We saw that I can probably deal with this in the Data Explorer, and I can show you more of that if we have time, but there's kind of a shortcut way. So I'm going to go into the connectivity checker, and I think they're trying to connect to a database as well. I'm going to do what's called create a report in here, which means just do a check. The developer gave me an instance ID. I will give this a name. The developer gave me an instance ID, and they're saying, I can't connect to this DNS name. So I'm going to select instance as my destination type, and I'll start typing the instance name. Let's see how far I need to go. 5, I'm pasting this from the ticket. Okay, there it pops up. This is my instance that's initiating the communication. And then I've got a DNS name here, but if you hover over this, I can see that this is enriched with a bunch of information. So not only do I have my IP address, but I also have the DNS name here, and I have the VPC ID and the subnet ID, and all of these details are going to be searchable. So this is going to come in handy now, because now all I have is a DNS name, but I'm looking for an instance name. So I go to IP, I'm going to start typing it. Let's see how far I have to go. So there's a bunch of stuff that's running on this, under this DNS name. All right, that got it. So this is the instance I'm trying to talk to. There's my database instance. I know the default MySQL port is 3306. Yeah, yep. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm going to run this report. And first of all, looks like the instance trying to initiate the connection is stopped. So I don't know if you've ever had a scenario like that. This is something that the developer might need to know, right? Maybe there was a mix-up, or maybe they don't know that it stopped. So that's something that I can tell them right away. And notice I got this information in seconds. It looks like things are happening, the traffic's flowing through the transit gateway as expected, but then at the end of this forward path, I've got another problem. Okay, traffic blocked by security groups. And that was something that I wanted to show you too. If you have questions about traffic blocked by security groups, I can show you more there. There's another way I can look into this. But here I know that I have the security group ID, and I can get more information about it if I need it in Kentik. And I can go talk to the owner of that security group, and I can say, hey, we got to figure this out. Or maybe I fix it myself because I have access. And then on the return path, though, I see something that I may need to be the one to fix. An intermediate transit gateway does not have a route to the destination instance. So, that's some network connectivity that needs to be built so that these resources can talk to each other. So just from this connectivity check, I've got a ton of information to help me with a resolution. And so I kind of see this as decision support. A lot of our customers deal with this problem. This is why we built this tool. They deal with this problem using a series of spreadsheets. So if you are the person who asked the question about AWS accounts, if you are managing a bunch of different accounts, maybe you have a spreadsheet with all the account numbers in it, you have a spreadsheet with all the VPCs, maybe you have a spreadsheet with all the teams and what different VPCs they're accessing. So our customers are trying to solve these problems by correlating things from different spreadsheets, and it takes a long time. Not to mention there may be stuff you have to look for in the shell too. So this cuts out all of that and allows you to take any identifying information from one resource, check how it can connect to another resource, and then you're good to go to get to the solution.
Do the resources have to be in the same cloud provider? Say you're wanting to do something crazy like run an application out of AWS talking to a database running in Azure for some reason.
That is a really great question, and the answer is no now. So I'm showing you, this is in beta in AWS, and we're currently building it for Azure as well as for GCP, but we're gonna keep expanding on this concept because our customers really like it, and eventually I see this as a hybrid cloud connectivity checker. So you would not only be able to check a connection between an AWS instance and an Azure instance, but also, some DNS name that you are hosting in your private data center. So answer no now, yes later. And I'm going to consider that to be a feature request too. So, all right, what else we got here?
Sorry, could I just add a quick follow-up to that?
Please
Can it do connectivity between on-prem or a data center up to AWS?
That not yet. Not yet.
Purely within AWS.
Right now, it's AWS to AWS, but that is something that we're putting on the roadmap, because I think hybrid cloud, like testing and understanding hybrid cloud connectivity is a very big deal for us and for our customers. So that's something that we really want to build and move forward with. Yeah. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about toil. I will shorten my conversation about toil, but it's really just saying what Avi was saying about Kentik. What we really are trying to do is make life awesome for people building and running the connected world. And, you know, having been one of those people, having been an on-call Red Hat sysadmin and, you know, getting paged in the middle of the night and trying to resolve an incident like with a baby in my lap, like I care about this on a human level. And I understand that we are humans, like building not just working in the cloud, but building the resources that everyone uses on the internet to live their lives, and they're humans too. And the thing about toil, which I won't blab about too long, the thing about toil is this is the manual, repetitive, like work that you could automate. It doesn't have a lot of value going forward. It doesn't improve reliability. It doesn't make anyone's life easier. It's just like the grind. The more time you have to spend on the grind, the less time you have reducing that grind for the future and making your services better and making your life easier over time. So if we can keep that toil to below 50%, that's the sweet spot. And that's really, I think, what Kentik is doing. We are trying to, and there's more here, there's alerts, which a few folks have asked about in terms of synthetics. There's alerts on a lot of the stuff that I was showing you and can keep showing you. Also some interesting intersections of synthetics and cloud that we're continuing to build. But really the bottom line is what all these things do, what this comprehensive observability does, is it reduces that toil, it adds decision support so that people can feel confident and collaborate effectively when solving these problems. So yeah, just trying to democratize that process.